Hello, everybody. My name is Connor Lynch with Westwood Media Center. We are proud to be partnering with the Council on Aging to provide virtual programming through our cable channels and online to keep seniors engaged throughout the coronavirus pandemic. We can be found on Comcast channels 8 and 12, Verizon channels 32 and 42, as well as online at westwoodmediacenter.tv. I'm happy to turn things over to your host for the evening, the Director of the Council on Aging, Lina Arena-DeRosa. Lina, take it away.
Thank you, Connor. And again, once again, we love Westwood Media Center. Thank you so much. Hello. So Connor, happy holidays. By the time this runs, it'll be after the holidays. But everyone, happy 2021. Hopefully 2021 will be better than 2020. Welcome, Eddie. Once again, we are thrilled to have you on our cable station. You've become a personal friend of mine, and I appreciate everything you have done for us. I'd like to introduce you so people know who you are. So I'm going to read this, and then we'll move forward. Eddie Martucci is graduated from the University of Connecticut with a BS in pharmacy way back in 1983. He has a PhD in pharmacy, and he did that in 1992. He is certified as a diabetic educator and an asthmatic therapist. And he's a certified pharmacist vaccination pharmacist since October of 2011. He used to own his own pharmacy from 1983 to 1993. And then in 1993 to 2000, he operated even more farm. He was the manager of 5 independent chain pharmacies in Hartford, Connecticut. And from 2011 until now, he has been the manager of several big Y pharmacies and wellness centers. He moved to Walpole in March of 2017, is married, and has a large extended Italian family that I hear about and love. And welcome, Eddie. We're so grateful to have you here to talk about COVID-19, the vaccine. Is it the cure? Take it over, Eddie.
Thank you, Lina. And again, thank you so much for your opportunity, allowing me the opportunity to do this. Connor, thank you very much for Westwood Media, to have this done. The talk that I'd like to talk to you about today is COVID-19. We started doing this, Lina, with our Lunch and Learns that you coined, and I stole the term from you because it's an awesome term. And now we do them virtually. So the COVID-19 vaccine, is this the cure? I wanted to just touch on the COVID-19 timeline. As we see on the screen, we have December 19, there was an outbreak, a pneumonia outbreak, very severe in Wuhan, China. January 30th of 2020, the World Health Organization declared a public health emergency. Just a month and a half later, they declared a global pandemic. In the middle of April, the United States did mandated sheltering in place so that we could have physical distance from each other. And then things got better. And in July 9th of 2020, we started reopening most of the states so people could travel and gather and see each other. And as you can see on the chart down below, those are new cases of COVID-19 beginning in February of 2020 through December of 2020. And you can see that through the Thanksgiving holiday, we had to start restricting gatherings again. And I'm sure that Lina and you and I talked about this morning. I'm sure 90-95% of the people did everything right, but those 2.5 hours sitting around the table with our masks off, eating, seeing people we haven't seen before caused the spikes in the COVID-19 infection rate. I just wanted to bring this up about notable pandemics. The numbers up on top are SARS-CoV-2, that's our COVID-19 virus. And to date, as of this morning at 8 a.m., 77 million people worldwide have gotten COVID, and 1.7 million people have died. It's very staggering numbers when you think about it. So we'll talk about Operation Warp Speed, which occurred in March of 2020. And Operation Warp Speed was created with a goal to have available 300 million vaccinations for the COVID-19 pandemic by January of 2021. Very, very high goals they set for themselves. What Operation Warp Speed is, it was a partnership that was created between the following groups, and it was used to accelerate the development of a vaccine while ensuring safety and efficacy. And you can see that the 5 groups that were involved were the Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health, BARDA, which I just learned about while I was doing this talk, which is Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, which is actually a subdivision of HHS, and BARDA reports directly to the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, and then the Defense Department. Just a little bit about what Operation Warp Speed did. They appropriated over $10 billion to fight this pandemic. They had 14 companies chosen out of more than 100 that applied to make a vaccine. 7 of those companies were given authorization or authority to produce the vaccine. EUA stands for Emergency Use Authorization, and that was given to 2 companies so far. Pfizer, as we know, and Moderna just got theirs several days ago. And then McKesson Drug Wholesaler won the bid for distribution. We'll talk about how that happened, because that was interesting to me. I found that out as I was doing this research, how that all came about. I want to talk about the vaccine. We have a nice little picture here of vaccine. I'm sure everybody has seen this in their doctor's offices or when they go to their pharmacy to get their seasonal flu vaccination. Who are the players that we have? So I made a little roster, and most of us here in Massachusetts appreciate the gentleman on the left of my screen, Mr. Dustin Pedroia. He's a stalwart. And the roster that started out, and I listed it by companies that are going to be producing the vaccine in that order. So first we have Pfizer-BioNTech, which we know has produced a vaccine, has shipped a vaccine. Over 3 million doses have been shipped. Moderna just got their authorization. They're set to ship over 4 million doses in the next 2 weeks. Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, AstraZeneca, and Novavax. It's kind of interesting to note that numbers 2 and numbers 5, Moderna and Novavax, have never brought a vaccine to market for use in the public. They were always a biomedical research company. Well, they still are a biomedical research company. This slide shows us how the vaccine works, and it's a lot of different science that's involved in it. You see the first 2 that came out use messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is something that is genetic material of the virus that they inject into our cells to produce more of their virus. Janssen and JJ and AstraZeneca have a replication defective viral vector, and that is similar to its own coding, and that gets injected into our cells to create a defective corona spike. And then Novavax uses subunits of the protein of the virus itself with an adjunctive agent to give us a better antibody response. They actually put that in insect cells and inject that into the human body. All of these 5 vaccines do one thing. They have our cells produce the corona spikes that you saw on the very first slide I put up of the coronavirus. And so that our bodies then see that it's not us, we don't like that. Our macrophages eat them up and they build antibodies so that if we do see the coronavirus, it will attack it. As you can see, FDA approval, the status was approved for 2 of them for the emergency use authority for Pfizer and the Moderna product. The other ones are to be announced as they're coming. J&J is only 4 or 5 days behind Moderna. So probably by right after Christmas, they probably will have their EUA in place. I put the refrigeration times in because once it's shipped, and we've all heard about how Pfizer's has to be kept at -70 degrees. And so most of your local pharmacies aren't going to be carrying the Pfizer vaccination, because I know we at Big Y don't have freezers that can go that low. But 5 days in the refrigerator is how long it will last. Once it's reconstituted, it has to be used immediately. They say it can last for 6 hours, but they really recommend that you have to use it immediately. And I'll talk a little bit about reconstitution in a second. Moderna's is 30 days, 3 months for J.J. Janssen. AstraZeneca feels theirs will be on the expiration date, and the Novavax product, they're really not sure yet how long it'll last in the refrigerator. They're a little bit behind in their stage 2 and stage 3 trials. They're not behind their own schedule. They're behind the other companies. The 2 different colors on the screen show the one in red that Pfizer's has to be reconstituted. And there's a very specific way. It's not to be shaken. It's just gently rolled from side to side. And then you inject 1.8 milliliters of sodium chloride for injection. You can't use bacteriostatic sodium chloride. And then you draw up the dose, which is only 0.3 mLs to give the injection. The other 4 do not need reconstitution. You can see the effectiveness rates for protection against COVID-19, and they're all extremely high. The last part of the graph shows how many vaccines you need, and 4 of them need 2 vaccines, and J&J again is the one in green, which needs only 1 vaccination, and then there's either 3 weeks or 4 weeks between the 2 shots. They all do the same thing, though. Let me reiterate that. They all have our bodies make the corona spikes of the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus so that our body can fight it as soon as it sees it. This is the slide that everybody really wants to know about what are our side effects for it. I'm moving you guys up top. For me, it's a little easier for me to see my whole screen. The side effects are pain at the injection site, headache, joint pain, fatigue and tiredness, feverish chills. And then only with the Moderna product do you get some lymph node swelling, and it's actually only on the side of the body where you had the shot. So if you got the shot in your right arm, you're going to get swelling on your right side. These side effects normally last a couple of days. They're normally seen after the second dose, of course, with the exception of the J&J vaccine. And it's probably best to get the vaccine when you can rest the very next day. As a matter of fact, we've seen anecdotally here in Massachusetts, where they're vaccinating most of our hospital employees now, that they are making sure they're vaccinated on the day when they have the next day off. I want to talk a little bit about vaccine priority. How do we prioritize who gets vaccinated? Now, the FDA has set down these guidelines. And just so that we're all clear on what that is, the Operation Warp Speed Committee and the FDA work together to have meetings, and they have them several times a week. And they send out the minutes of their meetings as to this is a good idea, this may not be a good idea, this might be feasible, but they don't have any playbook. So it's a little more difficult for people as we disseminate into the communities, how are we going to do this? But they've set these priority groupings. Group 1A is healthcare workers, first responders, and people living in nursing homes. Group 1B is all the essential workers, other group living situations, people over 65, and people under 65 with risk factors. And then phase 2 is all other people who consent to get vaccinated. Now, the states have the option to accept these as whole and total, or they can change them around. For instance, I know Massachusetts is wondering where we're going to put the prison population, whether it's going to be at the end of 1A or the beginning of 1B, or kind of a hybrid in the middle. Maybe we have 1A2. I don't know how they're going to designate it, but every state is deciding on how they're going to do it. The one thing that's very important to notice is how you get designated. I know Big Y just found out last week that it's up to the employer to identify essential workers and healthcare workers. So our company has to identify the 100+ pharmacists and 190+ techs that we have, that they are in 1A. And then we'll see how we get vaccinated from that. I wanted to put up the risk factors once again. People who are at higher risk of getting the COVID-19 virus, adults, age over 65 in any situation, those over 80 in a nursing home, people with heart disease, respiratory disease, or diabetes, and immunocompromised individuals. And then those were all the original risk factors that came out at the end of March of 2020. And then at the end of May, from the pandemic sweeping through the world, we found out those last 2 categories, the ones in the light purple and pink, people who have a BMI of over 40, that's body mass index, people, so that would be obese people. People who are HIV, people who are homeless, low-income people, cancer, kidney disease, and liver disease also fit into those categories that they found after May. So what group am I in? We can see all the different names of all the workers, and I know I've missed some of them, and that doesn't mean they're not important. I tried to just think as many names as I could while I was making the slide. So what group am I in? And again, as I said, that is up to your doctor to identify you if you're a 1B risk, if you're under 65 with health risks. That's up to the group home situations. If you have a family member living in a group home situation, that's up to the employer as to identify if you're an essential worker. And we have to understand what an essential worker is. Now you see up in the top there, we have teachers. That's up in the top because my daughter's a teacher. And some states haven't identified where the teachers belong. Massachusetts has put them in the 1B grouping. And I think that it's extremely important because we ask these brave individuals to every day go into a school with 20 or 30 children in their classroom and hundreds in their school to teach them and educate them. And we want to make sure that they are protected. I want to talk about herd immunity, and I'm sure we've all heard, and that's no pun, about herd immunity. And what herd immunity is, by definition, it's a form of indirect protection from infectious disease when a sufficient percentage of the population has become immune. And whether we become immune by vaccination or seeing the virus and surviving it, or pathogen, whatever the pathogen is, or if we're a child and we get it through our mother's breastfeeding, any way to get immunity, it reduces the likelihood of those who don't have immunity from getting the infection. And all it really means is that we're stopping an epidemic. So the thresholds for the percentage of population that need to be vaccinated, you can see on the screens here. And I put up several different pathogens that are there. COVID I put in red because that's important to us. If we vaccinate 60 to 75% of the population, we should eventually stop the pandemic from spreading and stop an epidemic from reoccurring. It doesn't mean it's like a light switch where we're just going to, okay, everybody's getting vaccinated, so we hit the light switch to off and we don't see COVID anymore. That's not true. And it doesn't mean, even when you're in the immunity threshold for a disease, it doesn't mean that nobody's going to get that disease. It just means the chances of anybody getting it who does not have immunity are much lower. We can see that up on the top, the very first one is measles. It has a very high threshold. And what happened in 2016 in New York, where we had a measles outbreak, was because we went down to about 75% of the population had been vaccinated in that community. And so they had a measles outbreak. It wasn't an epidemic, it was just an outbreak, which is better than an epidemic. But we can see at the bottom screen, one last mention, that we have the influenza, which is 33 to 44%. And that's yearly, it's much lower, but it's because the viruses, the flu viruses, normally change from season to season. Vaccine distribution. This is where we talk about how McKesson has won that. The vaccine distribution is through McKesson Drug Wholesaler. And I found that very interesting that every 3 years, the wholesalers in the country bid on who's going to supply pandemic supplies and vaccines, which I had no idea about. Didn't even think about that. Everybody just said when the vaccine came out, the McKesson would be sending them to the appropriate pharmacies. Operation Warp Speed originally contracted with CVS and Walgreens pharmacies for the initial vaccinations of 1A, the group 1A priority, because 93 to 95% of the US population lives within 3 miles of one of their stores. And you can see they have tens of thousands of pharmacies together. That doesn't mean your pharmacy won't be getting it, or our pharmacy. I know big Y pharmacies are part of 1B vaccination. We will be getting our Moderna vaccine at the end of January or the beginning of February. And so we will be able to vaccinate, and I'm sure anybody who goes to a local independent pharmacy is also available to do that. The Massachusetts Immunization Information System has loaded in and asked any pharmacy that wants to become a vaccination point to fill out a little questionnaire. We have to watch a little video, and every pharmacy manager of those pharmacies become a vaccination distribution point. Well, keeping track. So how are we going to keep track of who gets vaccinated and how we get vaccinated? And here's exactly how we're going to do it. We have no idea because there is no playbook set up for it. I believe that what's going to happen at 1A, the first part where the hospitals get it, it's very simple. They send the vaccine to the hospitals. Pretty much everybody in the hospital can vaccinate. Any doctor or nurse can vaccinate. So they say, oh yes, you work in my department, I'm going to vaccinate my department. And that's how we do it. What I'm told is going to happen, or the original protocols for what's going to happen, is that pharmacies will be given vaccine supply with a list of people that are prioritized 1A or 1B. And Massachusetts, I think, has changed it from 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is 1A in the federal standings, 2 is 1B in the federal standings, and 3 is 2. Just to make things more complicated, every state goes by what they want to do. But there is no playbook set up for it, which is good and bad. It allows the states to be able to have free reign of their people, but it also doesn't really give a whole lot of direction so that we're not consistently vaccinating every state the same way. So once we get our vaccination, our life goes right back to normal, right? We can go see the Patriots play. We can all get together for picnics and in the spring, and we can go shopping and spend all that money that we've saved for not going out over the last 5 months or 6 months. And I just want to reiterate that I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think it should be the case. As you can see, again, I brought that slide up that I had in the very second slide that shows the numbers of new cases starting in January 18th of 2020 all the way to December. And it shows the spikes at the end after we've had Thanksgiving. And as we said before, and we talked about Lina earlier, I'm sure most people, I would say at least 9 out of 10 people did everything right. They traveled with their masks, they sanitized, they stayed physically distant from parties they didn't know. But when they sat down to dinner for 2.5 hours, how can you not take your mask off? You have to eat and laugh and joke and have fun with family. That's what we are. We're social animals, and that's important. But we really still have to be vigilant. We still have to wear our masks. We still have to physically distance when we can. We still have to sanitize, and we should get vaccinated. I believe that's going to be the new normal that we have for that. I put up the next slide as references, and then Lina, I think your group had some questions for me, so we'll take those in a second. But these are some really good references that we can talk about the vaccine, that you can look at online, about the vaccine, about the current numbers that are happening. And again, as I said, as of 8 o'clock this morning, 77 million people worldwide were infected with this vaccination. And 1.7 million people have passed away due to it. So the CDC has a great website. The World Health Organization is always a good starting point for that. For specific vaccines, if you want, the CDC's website has a section called ACIP. And if you go into that, it has really good information about vaccinations, all vaccinations. Massachusetts on the mass.gov website does a great job. And our local towns all have information about that. So Lina, let's talk about some questions that your group had for me.
Before we talk, I really want to thank you. That was so clear, so honest, and so concise. Thank you, Eddie. As always, amazing.
I have my best critic. I give the talk to Grammy 2 times before we go through it, and she's very good. She critiques pretty much every slide that I have up there to make sure that people understand.
She did a great job, because I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a pharmacist, and I'm not an MD or a PhD. And I understood this. It was.
Well, I'm glad. That's exactly what she says. She wants to make sure that everybody understands, and I love it.
Grammy, good job.
She does a great job.
Okay.
We butt horns every now and then, but she does a great job.
Yeah, good job. Okay, so we have some wonderful questions, and I'm going to start with the top. I'm going to work our way down.
Okay.
Who chooses the priority vaccination groups?
That, again, is an extremely good question. It is up to our employers to identify us as essential workers or healthcare providers. It is up to our group living supervisors, if we are living in a group setting, as to identify us as being in the 1B grouping. It is up to our physicians, if we are under 65 and have healthcare concerns, as to the vaccination. The 1B grouping of people over 65, I'm pretty sure we can all figure out who those people are. The government has that information already. And we can look on a license. So pharmacists, we can still read numbers. So we can certainly look on a license to see who's 65.
Cool. Okay. Can any employer force someone to get the COVID vaccine?
Great question. The answer is no. Under an emergency use authorization, they cannot force anybody to get it. I know that several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, most hospitals mandate that their employees get the seasonal flu vaccine, and if they don't, they can't work. But that is not the case with the COVID-19 vaccination.
Okay. How do I get notified when it's my turn to get a vaccine? Because I'm a COA manager, and I wasn't on your slide, by the way. Tell Grammy she forgot about me.
I will fix that.
So as someone who works with elders, when would it be my turn? But I don't have any health risks or anything. And quite frankly, I'm not worried, because I'll still play by the rules. But
right.
So how do you know when it's your turn?
If you are opening your center and having people in, you're an essential worker. And that would be up to the town to identify that, to do that. I think what's going to happen is, I believe pharmacies will be getting vaccine with lists of people that are in their area, physically live in that area, that are on the list, and then it will be up to the pharmacies to call. I know that CVS has already announced that they are going to start doing times by appointment. I know Big Y is talking about that. Our people who run the department, Dave, is great at that. And I think what we are going to do is, again, do by appointments. I think we will put extra pharmacists on that are just going to be vaccinating pharmacists. So they'll go to a certain area, spend 4 hours in store A doing vaccinations to help the pharmacist that's there, spend 4 hours in store B to do the same thing. So it's probably up to the pharmacy to call the person. So you'll hear from your pharmacy.
Well,
pharmacy.
Here's a shout out to you, Eddie. I'm coming to you, but at Big
Perfect.
Y. But I also have another question that's actually not on this list. Does your insurance pay for it? Or
It's all covered by
does anyone know how it's being paid for?
It's all being paid for by the federal government.
So
That
there's
happened
no
even-
cost to me as an individual.
There is no cost at all to you as an
Okay.
individual.
Can I choose which vaccine I want? For instance, if I don't want to have to come back for a second one and I decide on the Moderna because I only have to go once, can I choose that?
Yeah, the J&J is once, but the answer is no, you can't. You
Okay.
get vaccinated with whichever supply was sent that was designated for you. Now, that being said, by May 1st of next year, they anticipate that there will be plenty of vaccine for anybody who wants to be vaccinated. At that point, if pharmacies have more than one vaccine in stock, and I'm not really sure as to whether my pharmacy is only going to get Moderna, or maybe I'll get some Moderna and some J&J and some AstraZeneca. I'm not sure how that's going to work out because we're just into the second company sending out vaccine.
Okay, good answer. Okay. Is this a yearly vaccine? Like, this is a really good question. Like the seasonal flu vaccine?
That's a great question. The answer is we don't know yet. And the reason that we don't know yet is because they do know that if you have had COVID-19 infection and you fought it off with your own immunity, then you are covered or protected against getting reinfected for at least 90 days. It has to do with how many people get vaccinated in the first wave. It has to do by a certain time frame. It has to do with what the incubation period is. And we do know that 6 to 14 days is the incubation period for the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus. It has to do with how are we opening up gatherings again. And to say a quick side note on that, at this time of the year, every year, I probably have sold, everybody knows what a Z-Pack is. I've probably sold 3 dozen Z-Packs. I think I've sold 2 since then. So our masks and our sanitation and our physical distancing works to keep viruses from spreading.
Yep. Do I only have to get the vaccine once, or do I need to go back like the shingles?
You have to have 2 shots for 4 of the companies: the Pfizer, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca, and the Novavax. The other one, the Janssen is a 1-shot deal.
All right. Well, I think you have answered most of our general questions. We will definitely have you back maybe in February when you're ready to start giving out the shots with Big Y, and you'll have a better understanding of what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you. As always, Eddie, you are amazing. Thank you to Big Y for letting them come to me. So please thank your bosses. I wish you the best throughout the holidays. Again, this won't play until afterwards. So happy 2021. And I wish you safety and health throughout the season. Thank you.
Bon Natal.
Bon Natal.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody. Please stay safe.